The changelings of Eberron are very unusual, not just because they can shift their actual form, but in terms of how they construct their identity.
So the Changeling started out when I first was working on the original idea of Eberron. I really like doppelgangers. But doppelgangers are a perfect example of something where I feel people don't usually think about them. They're usually just, I'm the evil shapeshifter who's impersonating the Duke, and no one ever stops to say, but what's a society of doppelgangers look like? You know, what's their culture? Why is he impersonating the Duke? I started just by making doppelgangers a bigger part of the world, but doppelgangers have a lot of special, abilities. They're sort of a high power level to have something as a player option. And so we basically made changelings as a sort of version of the doppelganger that is more accessible for player characters. It's a sort of, you can think of them as sort of offspring, sort of doppelgangers in other species, although again, within Eberron, they're a freestanding species of their own. But basically, as a changeling, you can freely change your shape. The biggest limitation is that you can't change your equipment. So it's not as overpowering as some people think, because, if you got a hat of disguise, you're actually a step ahead of a changeling. But it is still, you have this natural ability to change your form that can't be taken away. And changelings are also naturally very good at deception and sort of assuming different roles. And, it's very interesting, again, to explore what is their role in society. Do they work into, and again, sort of how do you have a positive role that's not, I just impersonate people and take their stuff. And so, are you worked into the entertainment industry? Are you spies? Because again, if we're doing espionage, having a couple good changeling agents is certainly useful. But at the same time, you are going to have a certain level of, are other people comfortable with you? Can they trust you? And so it lets you explore that. And changelings are, again, one of the smaller, sort of more, they're definitely an iconic part of the world, but within the world, they're definitely a sort of tiny minority who have to deal with other races, not necessarily trusting them.
And do they have a nation of their own?
They do not have a full nation. They're basically, what you have is, in the Lazar principalities, they have a principality, so they have there's a little changeling city-state that you could have come from if you're like, I'm from the one place where changelings, are their own folk. In Sharn, there's a changeling sort of district, a neighborhood that has, again, a community where changelings don't hide who they are, where this is a neighborhood of changelings. But then you do have a lot of changelings that do hide in plain sight. Who do either, as a changeling, you have to decide, were you born to a family of changelings or were you born into a community of another race? So you yourself grew up as a changeling in an elven community, and how did that work for you? And then finally, you have, again, these sort of nomadic clans that travel around in the Five Nations, never really stopping, but just, again, using their abilities to just sort of move unseen. We're a circus, we're a merchant's train, but again, we're actually a bunch of changelings going around and sort of living however we see fit.
But that has to invite a certain level of paranoia from
Absolutely.
all the other races,
Yes.
wherever you go.
Yes, absolutely. And that's sort of the point of that. Now, of course, one of the things I'd like to call out about Eberron, where people say, oh, but we'd be so panicked about changelings, is this is a world, of course, where you have hidden dragons, hidden demons, you have a underworld filled with aberrations and fiends under your feet that you never know when something could pop up. You have creatures literally manipulating your dreams. There's a lot of scary stuff out there. And so, changeling, okay, that's troublesome. But one of the things is, because changelings can't only change their appearance, they can't change their stuff, part of what it means is that I always sort of tell people are going to be thinking about things like, you're going to have, I'm going to be looking at you and basically say, well, you've got that pendant. And that's the one thing that I know You're always wearing your pendant. I'm always wearing this hat. And the reason I'm always wearing this hat is because if you ever run into me not wearing this hat, you might want to make sure that's not a changeling. Because I always have that hat. At the same time, I also like the idea that changelings themselves can also sort of communicate with one another using things like, I'm going to have a tattoo that means something in particular that I can just put on, and this tattoo means basically I'm in trouble, or everything I'm telling you is a lie, or something like that. So, you know, if you're a changeling and I'm a changeling, I know it, but I'm with my friends who don't know, I'm going to be like, tattoo, One thing I will say we also explore with changelings is the idea of personas. And the idea of a persona is that for a changeling, changing shape and such isn't just a parlor trick. You know, this is something they've grown up with. This is to them as natural as you or I smiling. You know, or changing your clothes, deciding to put this hat on. Well, for me, that's deciding to put this face on. And one of the things that we do is say that a changeling might basically have a particular identity that it creates as a sort of mnemonic focus for a particular thing. You know, in a changeling community, we have the doctor. And there's one doctor. Whichever changeling is currently in the office is going to become the doctor, because that's what you do. That's how we know, that's your uniform, if you will. But at the same time, it's also because when I'm being the doctor, my mind is more set in medicine. And so basically as a changeling, you can sort of pick a skill to focus on that's associated with a particular face you have. Right. So you can say, I've got my guy who's my fast hockey guy, and he's really good with deception, but I got to be him to get that bonus. And as I said, it's just a little way to explore that for the changeling, it's more than just skin deep. It is sort of about these things having meaning for you and having almost identities of their own.
Yeah, that's your form of communication. This is your form of language, and self-expression is the physical manifestation that you take on.
Because again, it's the same with the Warforged. It's all the races of Eberron. I really like thinking about what does it mean to you? You're not just a human who happens to have a hat of disguise. You are a creature that grew up with this ability being part of you. And how's that affect you?
You can purchase the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron on dndbeyond.com by clicking on the link in this video description. I'm Todd Kenrick, your host. Thank you for watching.